everyone. My name is Lisa Bugryn. I am the Professional Development Director at the Connecticut Society of CPAs. Joining me today is Mike Bolingbroke, who is Practice Director from Robert Half Finance and Accounting. Mike helps prepare up to 20 accountants for virtual interviews a week, and he is here with us today to share his tips for you on how to hold a successful virtual interview later this month at Interview Day. So welcome, Mike. It's great to have you here with us today.
Hi, Lisa. Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be able to help and sort of share the most common tips and tricks that I think help people.
Terrific.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks for that nice introduction. I'm a CPA myself. I used to audit and close the books. I've been with Robert Half just shy of a decade now. And yeah, so as Lisa mentioned, we help people find jobs. Clearly, everyone knows what Robert Half does, but then on top of that, we prepare them for interviews, most of which are virtual these days. So, Lisa, if you have questions for me that you think would help clarify anything that I'm going over, I've got some loose notes here. I don't have a major agenda, but I certainly have some things that I think will help everyone. I'd say on average, half of the things I talk about, people have already thought about it. It's the other half they have not. So I'll just get started right off and say that I think a virtual interview you should try to make a virtual interview as the same as an in-person interview would be, except for that handshake. That's the only thing that you can't do. But I think a lot of people try and treat them differently, and they ought not to be. You're trying to accomplish the same thing. And again, the only thing is you can't shake someone's hand. But everything else that you probably already know about interviewing will apply. So just, don't treat it too much different. Same as for in-person interviews, is we always tell people dress well. Don't be dressed the way I am. Okay, I'm a little informal today. It is so much better to be 10% overdressed than 10% underdressed. I mean, this is your first impression, sometimes your only impression with someone. So, whatever appropriate dress is for guys or gals, like, suit and tie or something crisp, something that's professional looking. And just like you would, again, in a in-person meeting, you want to be early to the meeting. You do not want to be have them waiting for you. You want to be waiting for them. Not only that, but with virtual there's a technology component to it. So I can't tell you how many times that I've been trying to log on to Zoom and my computer says, "Oh, give us 1 or 2 minutes to update Zoom." You can't tell your computer to stop doing that. It has to do it, but you were 1 minute early and now you're going to be 2 minutes late. So my advice is always, be sure that your technology works. If possible, do a test call with someone else. Make sure that, just want to make sure I'm covering here. You want to be in a place where you're going to have service. So if you're just do a test call with someone is what I would say. Make sure that they can see you. Make sure they can hear you. You want to make sure that you have your camera on guaranteed, which goes with testing it somewhere to make sure you have good connectivity. So sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to just interject in through running so many of these, virtual interview days. I can say that it's much easier if you're on a computer rather than a phone, which is useful. And if you don't have that option, at least make sure that the lighting behind you is not bright behind you, because it grays you out. So make sure you have good lighting in front of you. It was just what I was going to add to that.
You don't want to look like you're in the witness protection program. They can't see you. You want to make sure your background behind you is great. You don't want to have people walking by. Listen, I'm sure you could go somewhere if you don't have great Wi-Fi or great connectivity where you are. Heck, you could go to the CTCPA. I'm sure they give you a room. And then as far as to your point about having a phone, if you have to use your phone, I agree, use a computer. It's better. It's typically, but oftentimes when people are with the phone and they're holding it, then the person starts to get seasick like this. So if you have a phone, find some place, put it down, make sure it's placed somewhere. Again, do the test call with someone, because you have to have your camera on. If there's 10 other people that they're talking to and not, those 10 have camera on and you don't, you're going to be bottom of the pile. So you really want to make sure that that camera works and that you're presentable and all that good stuff. Same as an in-person interview, right? We haven't really talked that differently about a virtual versus, except we're talking about connectivity issues. Where possible, I tell people to stand up. If you're virtual, so you couldn't do that in an in-person, but sometimes it allows you to speak better. It sometimes gives you more energy. Again, make sure you've got the right setup for it. You don't want to be standing up and, all of a sudden now they're looking at you this way. But if you have a stand-up desk or something that can work, that works for some people. Practice it. Do it on your practice call with someone. Sometimes standing up, puts you a little bit more in that power position, so you feel more confident. So I always tell people, stand up if you can,
That's great.
and smile. This is all about practice again, but you don't want to be talking like this and putting on a negative sort of tone. You want to be smiling. You want to practice how to talk to someone, just like if you were in person with them. You want to have good posture. You don't want to be slumping in your seat. You don't want to be off camera this way. Everything is, you want to be as, I don't want to say picture perfect, but, in, good posture. Watch your nonverbal cues and presentation. You don't want to be touching yourself or this or covering your mouth so that people can't hear you. If you're far enough away, they might see if you've got your arms crossed. All these things, again, same as in person, they apply to virtual. You want to overall have positive body language. So that's all within the first 5 seconds. Sort of what we talked about. Making sure you can sign on early, everything works. You're waiting for them, and then someone's going to come on the phone. So you want to make sure you know who you're going to be speaking with. You should know that whoever's helping organize this should be able to tell you exactly who's going to be on the call. And I would say do a little bit of research on them and clearly do some research on the company. You want to know the name of the person who you're meeting with. You can look them up on LinkedIn. You can see where they've worked before. And then clearly you want to know about the company, whether it's a firm, whether it's private company, whatever it may be. You want to know a little bit about them, what their focus may be. If they're a firm, do they have, what does their website say? That's all you need to do. Are they focusing on manufacturing, nonprofit, whatever the industry focus may be? You don't, in general, want to ask questions that you could have found out early. So one of the things I know that we'll go over a little bit later, Lisa, is what sort of questions may we want to ask? We want to know what questions to be prepared for, but what questions do we want to ask? I always tell people, don't ask questions that you should have known the answer to if you just Googled them for 5 minutes, because then it shows whoever you're meeting with, wow, you really didn't take the time to do that.
That's great advice.
I would be prepared for the standard questions, and I don't have an exhaustive list here by any means, but what do you know about our company? You should know that. Okay, well, I know you do this. This is maybe when you were founded. This is how many employees are here. This is what you focus on. Things like, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Hopefully you've had some experience doing this. You should be able to talk about what you're very good at. And a weakness is not a bad thing to talk about, because any weakness you should be able to use as an opportunity to say, hey, here's what I'm working on. Here's what I am willing to admit that I'm not great at, but that I am focusing on. So you clearly turn that into a positive. But these are standard questions. And I don't want to take up the time on how to answer those questions particularly, because I think there's probably so many more resources that could do a better job than I could. But there are, better ways to be able to answer questions like that. Questions like, what interests you about this job? You should know about the job that you're interviewing for, or what you may be doing, or what is most typical in a job. We'll go over what some questions that you can ask to sort of pinpoint what this job might require, but overall you should know about the job. Questions like, what is your most significant professional accomplishment? You should have an example, if not multiple, to be able to explain what your experience is so far, how you've worked hard on something, how you've overcome some hardship, something to that effect. Why did you leave your last job? If you have had a previous job, if you're coming from something else, you want to make sure that you're always speaking very well of a place that you worked for before. There's a reason you're not there anymore. And it's typically not a great reason for one reason or another. And it could just be that you wanted to move on somewhere else. There are, again, better resources than I can provide right now to explain how to answer that question in the most professional way. What I would say is, and we'll talk more about this later, it is not always what you answer. It is very often how you answer. So if you can sort of be very professional about how you answer certain questions. Then they'll see how you carry yourself. They're clearly interested in what the answer is, but they're also interested in how you answer it. So
Sure, sure. And some of these positions that they are applying for are internships as well. So it may not have as much to do with why they left their last job, but why are they, looking
won't even
for,
come.
yes. Yep.
Right. But these are things that you could use in future years too, if that ever comes up. But great. If it doesn't come up,
Right.
it's one question you don't have to worry about. Um, I would be prepared, and this is not easy, but if the interviewer doesn't take the initiative like right away, like you need to remember sometimes the person interviewing is not great at interviewing. They might be new to it, and they could be just as nervous as you. So don't be nervous, because they could be. But if they don't take the initiative, I would say be ready to ask the interviewer questions about the role and to go over your resume and why you would be a good fit. If they don't do that, I suspect they will be. They've been trained, they've probably done it before. But I always tell people, be ready if this person, maybe if there's like a lag, or sometimes people don't know how to kick that meeting off. So you sometimes need to be the one to take the initiative to say, well, I'd love to learn more about the role. I'd love to go over my experience and why I think I'd be a good fit. And that usually kickstarts that. You're not going to have to carry the whole interview, but I'd be ready for a 5 to 10 second pause. Like, okay, let's get into it. Tell me more about the role.
Right.
If there's often some chit chat at the beginning before you really get into the role. And I think it's always nice to ask someone about their role, their journey. Like I tell people always love to talk about themselves. So if you want to ask them, oh, how long have you been with a company? Now, again, that may be something you could have found out on LinkedIn, but what led you to this role? What led you to accounting? I think those are great, just opener questions. It shows them that you're comfortable, to ask a question. And then I think also if you are able to have even just a 20 to 30 second chit chat back and forth with them, the more you can have them remember you, the more you'll stand out. So if you're the only person who does that and everyone else is just deer in the headlights and terrified and just, I will answer whatever question you ask me, you're going to stand out, I think, if you could have had a little bit more rapport. So not as
Absolutely.
easily done as said, but if you can just try and have it be a little bit more of a conversation, I think that's really, really good. Eventually, you're going to get into the interview. They're going to start asking you questions. And I tell people when answering questions, try to stick to what I call the 20-second rule. You don't want to answer a question too quickly without enough detail, but then you also don't want to drone on and on. So there's a limit. If they ask you, are you comfortable with XYZ? And you just say yes. You're not getting a lot of bang for your buck. They're not going to remember that answer. However, if you answer, yes, this is why I think I would be comfortable with that. I've done it previously, or I've heard about it, or I've done it in school, or I've studied it, and that's why I think I'd be comfortable. Great. That was just about 10 seconds worth. But if you take 5 minutes to answer that question and you sort of drone on and on, you're probably wasting daylight, meaning there's a limit to the amount of time that the person can be asking you questions. You want to save time so they can ask you more questions. And then I also remind people, make sure you're asking the question that they actually asked. So you want to answer like with enough detail about you and your experience to link up your answer with your resume and experience. So, which means you need to know what your resume says, your experience, you lived it, but you need to know what's on your resume. So hopefully they can say, oh, okay, yeah, in the interview, we talked about this thing and I see it on their resume here. They highlighted, okay, I think they answered this question, but here's what they were pointing out. But again, I'll go back to that. Make sure you're answering the question they asked. And so that sort of gets into my next thing is take notes to remember what they talk about. So I would advise against doing it on the computer. I think so many people use a computer for everything these days. I would suggest a pen and paper. And you can even tell them, hey, I hope you don't mind just jotting down some notes so that they know when you're looking here, it's not that you're not paying attention to them. It's because you're looking at your notes. When you're typing, I always think someone's typing an email to someone else. It's clearly not the case, but it's just one of those things I'd eliminate it. And when you are taking notes about what they're talking about, don't write down every word because then you're never going to be listening to what they say. But if they talk about, oh, this is how I got here, this is my journey, this is the role, here's what we expect, take down little notes because when you go back and answer a question, you can refer back to what they asked. That's a skill in itself. But the more you can develop that skill, and this is for the rest of your life when you're interviewing, it's great if you do get lost in an answer to be able to just quickly jot down and say, oh, they asked me about, what's my experience with XYZ. I remember the question, because some of us are so nervous and you don't remember what the question was, and then you just keep talking and droning, and that's what we're trying to avoid. So jot down maybe either the question that they asked, and that you can refer back to it if necessary. And not only that, but at the very end of this, I'll talk to sort of how to help wrap things up. Jotting down things will be great so that you can refer back to it, because not a lot of people can do that, or not a lot of people do it. I think just about anyone can, but not everyone does. So, when they have a question, try and answer it directly, try and stick to the 20-second rule. And if you need to refer back to your notes, hopefully you've just jotted down just like 2 words about what the question was. You don't have to write the whole question down, right? You need 2 words to remind yourself. Now, I want to talk about answering off the wall questions, because I get this question all the time. What if they ask me something that I'm totally not prepared for? And I sort of alluded to this before. How you answer is as important as what you answer with. So a couple easy things to do is, if you need some time, repeat the question verbally. So if you were to ask me, Lisa, gee, Mike, what's your favorite animal? And I go, oh my gosh, I wasn't prepared for that. I'd say, what's my favorite animal? I just gave myself 3 seconds to just coalesce my thoughts. That's a long time, actually. A small pause, too, I think is fine if you show them that you're thinking, because you don't need to answer immediately. And then my suggestion is the off-the-wall questions, I think, are always more important how you answer, not what you answer. So tell a story if you can. I think that will help them remember you. And I'm going to give you my example. This is just mine, but it is, I think, representative, I think, of answering off the wall questions. So one time in an interview, I was asked, what's your favorite animal? And I'll be honest, I was a little annoyed because I knew it had nothing to do with the position that I was interviewing for. And my favorite animal is an elephant. So I could have just said, my favorite animal is an elephant. We're done. Doesn't really tell them much about me, doesn't tell them how I think about answering the question, and it doesn't get them to remember me. What I said instead was, well, that's a great question. I grew up in South Africa. I lived there until I was 12. I was really lucky while I lived there. We'd be able to go to all these different game parks. And one of the memories that sticks in my mind was the first time I saw a large large African elephant. And it was bigger than the vehicle we were in. And I can still remember it to this day. So it's a memory that sticks with me. And I think that's why it's my favorite animal. I answered the exact same question with elephant, but I told them a story about me. I did grow up in South Africa. That's where I'm from. You got to tell them a true story, clearly. But it's hard to make that stuff up on the fly, but I'm saying that's how you answer. They're going to remember, oh, Mike, the kid who liked an elephant because he lived there, and it's what it reminded me. I mean, you're separating yourself from someone. It doesn't mean that you could do the job better than someone, but they're going to remember you. So if you can tell just some sort of story that personalizes you, they're going to remember you. And so that would be my advice about answering off-the-wall questions. Repeat the question if necessary. Pause a little bit if you need to. Not longer than 10 seconds. I think you're pushing it there. And then try and answer a question so that it personalizes you, so that they remember you a little bit better.
And Mike, I'm going to guess there's some topics that you shouldn't discuss during an interview, correct?
You read my mind. So I say, avoid any sort of small talk about, I've got it written down here, religion, politics, race, anything like hot button issues. It's not professional. You have no idea what that person's stance is on all these things. If they ask you, I would say avoid answering the questions. But to be quite honest, I doubt that they're going to ask you those questions. But you can avoid answering it or just saying, oh, geez, I'm not sure. If something were to come up, which again, I doubt it would, but you certainly shouldn't be the one bringing it up. So you're absolutely right. Any hot button issues, and we don't have an exhaustive list, but we know what they are. Avoid those things. Also, I would say don't ask about salary, benefits, or PTO in these interviews. You should either already know sort of what the salary range is. Whoever's helping you organize it should know that. You may not know what the benefits of the PTO are. Those are things that should be found out later. Right now, you're trying to get your foot in the door. You're trying to make yourself memorable to them. And one of the worst things you can do is, okay, how much are you going to pay me for this job? Clearly, they're going to pay you. You can figure that out at a different time, but now is not the time to ask that. Not only that, but very often the person who you're interviewing with has no idea about those things. So then they're going to go, I don't know. But whether they do or not have an idea of what those things are, I wouldn't bring it up. And then, so you sort of steered us into a perfect part about questions. What sort of questions, like, should we ask? The number one feedback I get from clients, or negative feedback I get from clients, is when someone did not ask questions at the end. And here's how it goes. The client, the person, the interviewer will say, geez, do you have any questions for us? And the person who's being interviewed is so hell-bent on getting off the phone as fast as possible, because we don't like interviews, that they say, nope, I think you answered them all. Well, here's the problem with that. You've been talking to this person for 20 minutes. How could you possibly know everything about that company or the role? The person interviewing you doesn't even know everything about the company or the role. So when you say that, I know why people do it. They want to get off the phone, but you show a lack of interest in the role, and they wonder if you are even confident that you can do the role. So you show a lack of confidence and interest. So I tell people you have to have questions. And what question you choose to ask, there's many different ones. Again, there's lots of resources online that you can go and see, what are good questions to ask. But I would, whatever questions they are, I would make them pertinent to the role. Don't ask, so when was the company founded? Like it's not pertinent. Like there are better questions than others. So I'm going to give you an example of like one of the best questions that one of my candidates asked many, many years ago. And they used and it will happen more than likely, if there is time left over, that they will say, geez, I've been asking all the questions. Do you have any questions for me? And so this is just one example. It is not the end all be all. You may have other questions you would prefer to ask, but she used it as an opportunity to summarize pretty much the entire meeting and the role. So again, having taken notes and jotted down things, she said, well, I appreciate you being able to chat with me. You talked about this portion of the role, this portion, this responsibility, this responsibility. I feel like I have enough experience to be able to help with all of those things. But you did talk about a couple of things. I'm wondering, what's the most important thing for you, for someone out of those things, to be doing in the first week, 30 days, 90 days? I can't remember exactly how she said it, but she was trying to have that person prioritize to them, what are you going to have me focusing on first, and what is the most important? And it was brilliant because, one, it showed that she had been listening. It showed that she understood the role because she sort of explained it back. And then she showed her interest clearly in what will I be doing day one? What do you want me to focus on? What can I be prepared for? Which is great because it shows interest, it shows confidence. She explained why she could do it. And the other thing it does, and this is what the client told me after, is mentally, it made the client picture that person in the seat doing the job. That is a huge mental hack right there. If the interviewer did not have to picture other people in the seat and they pictured you, you're going to be elevated towards the top of the list. Maybe not number one, but you're going to be in the upper echelon because they are just mentally having to picture you in the seat. So it was brilliant. And I give that suggestion to so many people because I think it really, really does help. But
showing an interest is so important. I will say it's definitely very, very important to show an interest.
Right. And these, everything we've already talked about, a lot of these things are practice skills. So if you have a family member or a friend who can stay serious for 20 or 30 minutes, so it's not just a big laugh fest, practice these skills. The more you do it, the better you will become at it. It's just, like a fact, you're not going to be great at it the first time. So I would say practice it with other people if you can. And then I always tell people, end the interview on a positive note. So, they're typically going to wrap it up. I would say thank them for their time at the end. assure them that you're interested and that you think you're a good fit for the job. If you are, don't lie. Like if you know you definitely don't want the job, well, don't tell them that. But hopefully the answer is, yeah, I feel confident I can do the job and I want to. Make sure they know that. I always think sending a follow-up note is an absolute must, depending what is appropriate, whether you're sending it directly or if someone who helped you organize it, if you send it to them and they can pass it along, keep it short. One line, maybe 2 lines, don't drone. You don't need to write them a paragraph and remind them who you are and what they can do. Nice, short, and sweet is appropriate. And then I would say ask for, whether it's in the interview itself, if you think it's appropriate, or if it's in the thank you note, ask for next steps and the timing of them. It shows, again, your interest.
Right.
So I guess, like, to summarize everything we've talked about, be friendly, be memorable in a good way, give them confidence that you're qualified, and let them know you're interested. And I think if you do these things, you're going to find yourself at the top of the candidate pile.
These are great tips. I really appreciate you sharing all of these thoughts with our students who will be participating. The interviews are 35 minutes, and we certainly don't want a student to come in and be finished at 10 minutes. So these are all really great tips to get them there and have a meaningful interview. So I think that's I don't really have any questions. You have really covered a lot. This is intended to be an intro to the firms, and then if the firm wants to follow up, they usually will have you in for an in-person interview. But I think this is great information, and you've definitely helped them get there. So
Good. Everyone, best of luck. You can do it. Again, it's a skill, so practice it if you can. And best of luck to everyone. Yeah, I hope it goes well.
Terrific. Okay. Well, Mike, thanks for being with us today, and I'll keep you posted on how things go.
Sounds great. Thanks,
Have a
Lisa.
great day. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.